Welcome back to the Iron Sights podcast. I'm in the studio today with a very interesting meetup. Guy's name is Rick Field. Rick, welcome to the show.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you having me here.
I appreciate you making the drive over. It's been a little bit of a journey for you to get here today. You made it in. I think there's some really important shit we should be talking about, and you are sort of a subject matter expert on some of those things. And we're going to get into that. You have an interesting background in medicine. There's a military career there, there's a medical career there, and then there's a law enforcement career there, and a lot of time spent in the Department of Corrections here in the state of California. But before you do that, dude, I want to know, what are you doing in the gym every day? Because, and I mean, how old are you, man?
I'm 52.
Yeah, you look like, I hope to look as good as this dude at 52.
Well, if you keep on that trajectory, you're doing good yourself.
Yeah, man, you're taking care of yourself. I mean, and I think it's a good opportunity to kind of talk about how we got connected, and that was through Dr. Robert Floyd, who has been in the studio and talked about basically longevity and figuring out how to do what you're doing on a daily basis now to take care of yourself. Let's talk about it, man. How many days a week you working out? Like, what are you eating? What are you putting in your body?
Well, 6 days a week. And it's been since I was about 14 years old. So it's really been a passion of mine for a long time. And it's one of those things, as you know, obviously, you know, that when you get out of the gym for too long, man, it's hard to get back. Mm-hmm. And you get too far out of shape. So, I've always been on the cusp of, being in shape. I don't consider myself to be in shape right now, but I'm doing, like I said, I'm not doing too bad for 52. So diet wise, I've met Rob Floyd. I was doing a presentation. We'll talk about my organization in a minute, but I was doing a presentation over in Monterey, and Rob's dad was there. He sells some insurance, and he saw my presentation, and my presentation is about stress mitigation, employee wellness, officer wellness in the LE world. And he reached out to his son, Rob, and told Rob about me. And he says, "Hey, you're kind of missing a piece." And Rob does it's a lifestyle. It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. And he promotes paleo, healthy living, longevity. The guy's passionate about helping people live better lives, live longer lives. And I'm doing the same thing, but in a different way. Where he's doing it nutritionally, I'm doing it in stress mitigation. And the two kind of go together. If you think about diet and hormones and hormone regulation, and just health in general, the more unhealthy you are diet-wise and physically, the more difficulty you have dealing with stress, and longevity becomes a problem. Chronic disease sets in and those types of things. So I hooked up with Rob. We started talking about what he does and what I do, and we found that there's, a mutual philosophy, and that by working together, the two of us to a certain degree, that we would complement one another. So, and I saw Rob's podcast when he came in and was talking with you. The guy's so passionate, and he knows a ton of stuff. And I'm gonna give him a shout out. Leaky Gut Solutions. That's his program. He's doing great things. He's out of Reno, Nevada. Great dude.
Yeah, but you don't have to live in Reno to take advantage of Dr. Rob. You don't. Like he's available online, which is his thing now, because he wanted to impact more people. Irrespective of where he was in the world. So that is, Leaky Gut Solutions.
So, and one thing, just to promote his program a little bit more, relative to the outcomes that I had, because I did his program, and it's 12 weeks, and it was amazing. I went from 230 pounds down to about 212. And at the time, I was somewhere probably close to 10, 11% body fat. I didn't lose any strength. I really didn't lose any size, even though I was losing weight. My muscularity, my vascularity, I was doing better. And I used to, I try to go out and golf, and my hands would swell, my joints would swell. And what I found was the inflammation markers in my system actually reduced significantly, and my kidney function increased. And I have a rejuvenation doctor as well. I'll give him a plug, Dr. Diego out of Fresno, California. Okay. He's my rejuvenation doc. And I go to him for hormones, testosterone, and those types of things for longevity.
Takes a team approach sometimes.
Oh, it sure does.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do it on your own. And one way or another, as you get older, and I can speak specifically, from the male's perspective, as you start to reach 40 and you get north of 40, things change. They're just different. And to think that you're going to do it all by yourself, or there's a one size fits all, you're going to find out real quick. If you've lived a life where you've constantly challenged yourself, whether that be through exercise, diet, your profession, whatever it happens to be, things are going to catch up. And so it's not shameful at all to be plugging these people, because more people out there need to know about people like Dr. Floyd, and I'm sorry, one more time, was his name?
Diego Allende.
Yeah. And
rejuvenation specialist. He really knows the stuff when it comes to hormones and those types of things.
So it again, kind of finding this balance. My understanding is there was a time in your life where you weren't as quite as balanced and may have had some health issues that maybe, I don't know, maybe kind of redirected how you had to approach things a little bit. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So always been a gym rat, and probably the biggest I've ever been was 265 pounds.
Dude, that's a lot of beef.
It's a lot of beef, 20-inch arms, just a big guy. And coming up in the law enforcement world, did 27 years with the Department of Corrections, and started the Department of Corrections in kind of it was a nursing and a peace officer position. It was a MTA position is what they called it. So you had a badge, you were a sworn peace officer, but you were also, in my situation, I was a licensed vocational nurse. So I was trying to, be healthy, but over the period of time, such a stressful job, and we're going to get deep into that. We'll deep dive into that. The difficulties over the years kept building up. And even though I was in the gym and I was trying to be healthy and I was pushing heavy weights and I was doing, all this stuff, a SWAT medic. And then at one point I was no longer a SWAT medic, became an entry guy as an operator on the SWAT team.
These are stressful fucking jobs.
Stressful job. Yeah, exactly. And then I ran the investigation unit over at Corcoran State Prison for a little while. So yeah, stress on top of stress on top of stress. And what was happening, and I was ignoring it, was that my blood pressure was creeping up. In my 30s, I had high blood pressure, but I was always telling myself I'm healthy. I don't need to take blood pressure pills. I don't need to manage that. I'll manage it through working out. But as you know, the more weights that you lift, it actually causes hypertension because of the pressure that you put on your body and your head and your system. So over years of untreated hypertension and a diet that was grossly overdone on the protein, we kind of came up in the same era. I'm a little bit older than you, but it was that 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight,
right.
And I'm pushing 300 grams of protein down my pie hole every day.
It's a lot, man.
It's a lot.
Hard on the guts.
Well, not only that, it's hard on the kidneys.
Yeah, it can be, yeah.
Yeah. So over time, my system had a difficulty in not treating the hypertension. So I wound up having a small stroke at 43. The stroke was in my hypothalamus. And there's some people that would argue out there that I wasn't using a significant portion of my brain anyway, so it really didn't matter. But
easy, man.
Yeah, yeah. So that was kind of a call, an awakening for me, and to start treating my hypertension. And it wasn't shortly after that I was diagnosed with kidney failure. Yeah. So
that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now you're on this place where you have to probably be readdressing whether you want to or not. Like, and I was saying this before, like if you're not paying attention, it's going to creep up on you one way or another, and you're going to have to make some adjustments. You're going to be forced to do it in maybe a way that means doubling down on the work that it takes to actually get better rather than starting this early. So can you maybe talk about that?
Sure. 100%. Yeah. So, when I was told that and I was in stage 2 and stage 3, between stage 3 and 4 is when dialysis hits and all that kind of stuff. And so that I knew that I really had to get a hold of it. And my rejuvenation doc was like, you got to stop the protein. You got to, he was like 150 grams of protein is really all you need in your diet. But if you don't do something soon, you're going to be in a bad way. And
at your particular situation, yeah.
In my situation, yeah. So I knew that I had to start dieting, and this is before I met Rob and got involved in his program long before. So I was trying to do it on my own, and just like everything else in my life, I've always been like, I can handle this.
You're gonna power through it.
I got to power through it. Yeah. I can fix myself, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. There's a lot of things I couldn't fix in my life, and that was one of them. So I didn't really get worse, and my kidneys would kind of fluctuate up and down. So I would, be on the cusp of stage 3, and then I would go back to stage 2, and all of it was my EGFR, my glomerular filtration rates. And I was trying to drink a lot of water and trying to lay off the protein, but it wasn't enough. So I had to drop some weight. I had to really start looking at what a healthier lifestyle looks. And a lot of it was the stress, because even though I was on these blood pressure pills, it was not unusual for me to be up around my blood pressure 190 over 120.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and that was on blood pressure pills.
Wow.
Yeah. So
How old?
I was, 43, 44,
Yeah, you're still a young man.
46. Yeah.
Wow.
And then the second shock wave hit at 48 when I had a small heart attack in the back of my heart.
And now it's knocking.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I mean, how many lives does the cat have right, at this point, right?
Yeah. And then, there was some alcohol abuse, not heavy, but, when I say alcohol abuse in the law enforcement world, because of the stress levels and because of the hypervigilance and the adrenaline levels and the cortisol levels and all that stuff. And this is stuff I've all studied after the fact because it impacted me so heavily, is that when you get home after, 8, 10, 16 hours of working inside of a prison, going to sleep is not a thing. Yeah. You don't just roll over and put your head on a pillow and crash out.
Forget about the day.
You don't. You replay a lot of stuff in your brain. And then, you have the home life that you got to try to balance as well. So there's impact there. So, to have a couple of bourbons or, something as you try to wind down. And a lot of times you sit on the couch and you watch TV and you try to veg but it's just not enough, unfortunately. So you try to get that buzz so you can, start to feel sleepy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, on top of the buzz, you throw a little bit of melatonin in there or, some Tylenol PM so you can get some type of sleep, because even though you're not getting quality sleep, some type of sleep is better than no sleep at all. Mm-hmm. And, ultimately it was leading up to my health issues. So, and I will say that Dr. Robert Floyd's program helped in every aspect. My kidney function is actually better. I just saw Dr. DeAngelo Allende a few weeks ago, and my latest lab results, the guy draws 15 vials of blood every 3 months. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I've got the best kidney function right now that I've had in years. So shout out to Dr. Robert Floyd for, helping that happen.
Right? Again, yeah. It's combining the brains and the minds that want to help people get better rather than prolong a process by throwing a pill or whatever at it. Check back with me in 3 months. No, let's find a solution to the problem.
Right.
And it's never too late to do that. But the longer you go, the harder it gets. And we're all on the clock, let's be honest.
Right.
And you've already alluded now to some of, the things that you did as in your career. And there's some really hard statistics to have to really face and look at with regard to lifespans of anybody involved in LE, any first responder for that matter, but particularly in the system that you worked in, you're already, your longevity, your lifespan is already reduced. But going back to the stresses and just the inherent risks that exist on the job.
Yeah.
So getting your arms around this stuff early is really important so that you're not in this situation. Now, had you not been in the kind of shape or the kind of condition you were in, or been physically taking care of yourself, or just been that guy that can power through things, that knows how to hunker down and do the work, who knows where you'd be right now? Well,
that, and I worked the majority of my career, I worked in high security prisons.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So between Corcoran, Saddif, Kern Valley, those are very stressful jobs.
These are nasty places.
Nasty places. And about 2 years out from retirement, here I am traveling up and down California, doing presentations on stress mitigation and taking care of yourself and those types of things, self-care. And I wasn't practicing self-care myself. I was working in high security prisons, and it was kind of an ego thing going, that's right. I work in the worst prisons in the United States. And, but that's where my brothers and sisters were. And that's where I felt most comfortable. Mm-hmm. All cops, all corrections officers are ass kicking people, I don't mean that, literally.
No, I get you, but they want to be where the shit is, and they want to be there to back up their brothers and sisters.
Absolutely. Right. And when you have that bond and that camaraderie, that's where you kind of want to be. It feeds into a part of your life and becomes a lifestyle. And when you recognize that, it's not really working out for self-care because, if I keep going on the same trajectory, if things don't change, then I may not have a future. My last 2 years, I was like, I got to get out of high security. So I called up a friend of mine that I came up in the department with. She was a warden, or is a warden, over at another prison. And I said, hey, and it's a lower security prison. Stuff still happens there, but not to the level like Kern Valley and Corcoran and that type of thing. So I reached out to her and I said, I to survive at this point, to make it to retirement, I need to power down. I need to step out of some hypervigilance and mitigate my stress level. And I said, I'd like to come work at the prison. And she was gracious enough to say, I'd love to have you. So wound up doing my last 2 years at a prison that was not so violent and so demanding.
I got some questions, man. If we can kind of circle back for a second. So you mentioned, the law enforcement community, kind of where you fit in, the fact that you wanted to be there to help serve and protect first your family, your LE family, and then the people around them that you're I guess charged with protecting inside the prison system, that being inmates or whatever. But that kind of that drawing in towards wanting to be involved in the heat, right? And kind of wanting to be up front. And you mentioned being a SWAT medic and then being on an entry team. I think you mentioned, is that what the term was?
Yep.
Yeah. An entry team. Where did that start for you? I mean, was this something that was kind of already in you? Like,
it was it's a weird thing because, when I was growing up, I was an athlete and, played a lot of different sports and, kind of that alpha type mentality. And I've told people this, you go back and you do some self-evaluation and some self-reflection and you look back at things you did and you go, why did I do that? And not only that, but before I got into the wellness arena, when I started to look at how I was treating people, as a supervisor, as a manager, and then as a prison administrator, I found that I wasn't doing the best job of, treating people the way that they deserve to be treated. So that took some self-reflection. And when I really looked hard at it, I spent a lot of years being, overly alpha. And there's a lot of people that can probably connect with that, relate to that. It's like, I want to be the predator, not in a predator sense, but in a,
you don't want to be the prey. Let's put it that way. Right.
Yeah.
So you got to be top of the food chain.
Yeah. And I wanted to be top of the food chain always. And, but when I look back and I see the stress that caused on a lot of people, there's things that I wish I would have done differently when I was younger. And, but I was always wanting to push and some of it is that, adrenaline, when you work in the LA world, when you work in the prison life, all my LA brothers and sisters whether you're a street cop. Yeah.
I've heard this before, man.
Yeah. You get an appetite for adrenaline and for high risk behavior, and for wanting to do, hardcore things. And so the team that I was on in corrections back in the day was called Special Emergency Response Team. Now it's called Crisis Response Team, CRT. But it was the cream to the cream of, the correctional setting as far as operations and like an operator would be concerned, special ops or TAC ops or, that type of thing is what we did. We studied room entry and we were, our primary function was hostage rescue. So if there was ever a hostage situation that jumped off in the prison, there has been, since the inception of the CERT team, these things have actually happened and they activated, the team to go in and deal with the hostage situation. And, but that's where the team originated from. And really, when you look at historically where that operational team came from, Attica State Prison, when they had
70s.
Yeah, it was in the 70s in New York. Yeah. When they had that, the prison takeover, the inmates took over.
Went days.
Yeah, it went weeks.
Yeah, weeks.
It went weeks.
4 weeks or 3.5 weeks or something like that. Yeah.
Right. And the inmates wound up switching clothing with the corrections officers. And back then they were called guards, but now we're corrections officers. Yeah. And they brought in the National Guard to deal with the situation. And the National Guard, they had rifles and they lined the prison walls and unfortunately
completely unprepared.
And they didn't know who was who in the environment and what the environment looked like. Half of those people, probably the majority, never had seen a prison, been to a prison, but this was the force that they were using to take back over the prison. And what wound up happening was they shot and killed several
tragedies,
correctional officers because the correctional officers had the inmate attire on and vice versa. So out of that was born a different philosophy of we need to have some people on the inside that can handle these types of difficult situations without a potential loss of life.
So so you mentioned like Kern Valley, Corcoran, does each prison have one of these teams in there, or is it like there's a response team that would, like for the state, that would go in if something bad went down? Like, so, because I think when I look at this, like sort of from a from a military organization perspective, there's soft guys, and then there's the special forces guys, kind of special teams groups that kind of do their own things, and then there's DevGru, and there's all this kind of stuff, right? Depending on the job, we call these guys. Is it set up that way?
Back in the day when I first got on, and I got on in 96, and it was set up where every prison had its own team.
Got it.
And the reason why is because who knows that team, who knows that prison better than that team? And when you weren't doing, special operations type stuff, you were just working the line. So you got to know the prison, you knew, the nooks and the crannies. And if you were an operator on that team, then you were always evaluating, tactics and operational needs and that type of thing in your own environment. And to save money over time, as the state does, they look at making things different. And so they went to regional teams where they'd have, in some cases, 2 or maybe some 3. And I think there's might even be a regional team out there that has the responsibility for 4 prisons.
Wow.
And but they're made up of officers, sergeants, lieutenants. And in one case, I was actually a captain when I was on the Corcoran team, and that was as a sniper team squad leader. But when they start taking the people from those prisons to incorporate them into a team, you still have operators that know those prisons very well.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So somebody's kind of the leadership, and within that group, like, this is my spot, so I can give more direction. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Kind of like that, but or at least the go-to person. Should there be an operation that jumps up at an institution, obviously the guy or the girl, because there's women on the team too. You would be called upon if they were making a op plan, and to try to coordinate that and work with it, because you have the most knowledge of that institution. This is interesting to me, and I bet it is to a lot of other people that really have no idea what goes on inside a prison. And one's like what you just mentioned, which are some of the most dangerous and some of the most hardened, worst criminals in the United States are housed not in their backyard. Right. They're in far off places. I just crossed over the weekend. I just crossed over the border from Oregon into California up on the coastline. And I've heard this name. I heard the name of this prison a million times.
Pelican Bay.
Yeah. And I was just shocked. Like all the times I'd heard about it, I never actually knew where it was located. Like I knew about San Quentin because it's fairly local, regional to us.
Sure.
Up there above San Francisco up there. But I didn't know where this was. And it I don't know. It was shocking, and it was unnerving for me that I didn't know where it was. Mm-hmm. Like I literally just drove right past it. You can see it from the roadway nearly.
Absolutely.
It's right there. I mean,
especially at night with the high mast lights.
Yeah.
I mean, they light up things. I mean, that is a ton of light that comes off of a prison.
So, I mean, I guess if you live around there, and I remember actually taking a trip out to Wasco County when I was in college and visited one of the big cotton mills out there, which is like right across the street from
J.G. Boswell.
Exactly. Yeah. Boswell. Mm-hmm. And then the residents that live literally right across the street. When I say right across the street, it just looks like it's a neighborhood street, right? There's houses on one side, there's a street, then there may be a little strip of lawn. I don't remember if that's the case. And then there's a big gray wall. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side of that wall are some of the most evil people that have ever run the streets are in that wall. And then you're charged with going in there and making sure that they stay there, that they don't kill one another, they don't kill an officer, they don't perpetrate other crimes that are obviously can go on inside there. And I guess my point is while I was unnerved that I didn't exactly know where Pelican Bay was, I'm more unnerved that more of the citizens of the United States, particularly in California, because I'm a native here, they don't understand what really happens inside these prisons. And we arrest criminals and we put them behind bars, and then after that we forget about them.
We read in the headlines how heinous the crime was. And, like the guy down from Bakersfield that took the little girl off the streets, I think she was 17, 18 years old. And I read the case file at the time, and I can't remember all the particulars, but, he took her to a seedy hotel, and he killed her and drove a landscape spike through her neck, put her on all fours, and did bad things to her for a couple of days after she was dead. And while he was doing that, stabbing her with pruning shears, those types of things.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And this is the type of guy, that comes into the prison. And obviously that's, when you read the story, or you get a news feed on your phone, you're like, oh, wow, that guy, oh my gosh, people like that exist in life. And by the way, he later on killed somebody inside the prison as well, and did really bad things to the person that he killed. And I don't want to get too much into that because it's very gruesome. But so, we're dealing with these types of people. I take my brothers and sisters down at Kern Valley, and 3/4 of the population at Kern Valley, the inmate population, are doing life or extremely long terms, and they don't have a lot to lose. They don't understand that they could do better even in the prison setting. A lot of them are involved in gangs. It's very, very difficult for these people to do what we say, do their own time. Usually you have to become affiliated once you go into a prison. That's how you survive. And that affiliation requires you to do certain things. And
these are not good things.
They're not good things. No.
These are not community service oriented things.
No. And it's not unusual for, somebody to go in and doing a, 10-year prison sentence and wind up, staying in prison their whole life because of additional things they've done, offenses that they've done inside prison offenses, and these are the types of things, these type of people that we're dealing with. So yeah, I've seen some very horrific things inside of prisons. I've seen cops, be attacked. I had a guy early on in my career try to stab me, and we were doing a cell extraction, and the SWAT team got activated. Because one of the officers doing cell extractions before the SWAT team got activated. And we knew that these guys had weapons because we found metal missing inside the cells on the desk areas, it's stainless steel, and they cut it out. It's crazy how they cut metal with, things like
it's interesting what you were saying. Yeah. It was interesting what you were saying, going back to Attica real quick. Yeah. And that, they're swapping of the uniforms, and people think, oh, these are dumb people that are behind prison, when the reality of it is while they may be maniacal and evil, and there's some level of brilliance in what they do. So going back, they're finding ways to survive, and not only survive, perpetrate additional crimes. So they're cutting up desks, whatever they can get their hands on, right?
Yeah. I've seen videos. They've done videos of guys that were weapons making experts, and some of these guys have actually been willing to go on video, and usually it's the investigative services unit that'll go in and film these types of things happening. But they'll make plastic weapons out of styrofoam cups or plastic bottles that they have, that shampoo, or those types of things. Some of these guys are very, very intelligent. And by the way, some of the best artists that I've ever seen in my life are in prison.
Behind bars.
Yeah. And whether it's tattoo artists, and you're not supposed to tattoo in prison, but it happens, or, just drawings, or those. There is some talented people in prison. They just chose to not utilize those talents in the best of ways and commit crimes. But
well, yeah. I cut you off there. Sorry, just with regard to the creativeness and somebody trying to stab you. What happened? Yeah,
so they activated the SWAT team to go in and remove the weapons out of these cells, and these guys had barricaded their cell doors, and they knew we were coming for them. The line staff had been doing cell extractions previously, and then once that officer got stabbed in the leg, they pulled all the line staff out, activated the special emergency response team, and we went in and did, I think it was somewhere around 16, 17 hours of cell extractions.
How many cell extractions is that?
We did, God, it's been so long. They called it March Madness. It happened in March, obviously. There were so many cell extractions that night, and so it was off the hook. But they called it March Madness. So it was the first or the second cell that I was going into. We had Arizona doors, which are doors where holes have been drilled in, perforated doors, okay. Right? And these guys had taken a mattress and they tied the mattress through the holes so that they could barricade the door. So when we tried to open the door electronically or try to pop it open, it wouldn't move. Mm-hmm. Right. So we had to put a come along on the door. And as we were using the come along to open the door, we had the door open about 4 inches. And the first guy in, he's a shield man, and he's going to have contact with the first inmate. And then I'm the second guy in. And so I had my head hunched down behind the shield man, and I felt tap, tap, tap on the back of my head. It was actually a little harder than a tap. And I thought it was the guy behind me smacking me in the back of the head, get me fired up to go inside the cell. And I'm like, hey, I'm like, quit hitting me. The door's not open. No, I'm not hitting you. And I'm like, okay, somebody's hitting me. And it wasn't until the door popped and that mattress fell off. The first inmate jumped off the top bunk onto the shield man. And from there, it was a fight between those two. And the second guy came in and he rushed forward, made contact with me. I was a pretty big kid back then. I ran him up against the back of the cell, landed on top of him. And when I did, his right hand fell to the side. And what I saw was a knife that had been tethered to his hand. So if he lost control of the knife, he would be able to pull it right back to his hand and gain control of the knife again. And so I told him, I said, you touch the knife or you reach for the knife, right, and I'm gonna break your fucking arm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was the second cell. And then when we went back and watched the videos after the fact, it was then that we realized that was the guy. He had the knife in his hand and he was coming outside that 4-inch door opening and he was smacking me in the back of the head with a knife. But because I had a Riot helmet on and I had all my gear on, it didn't penetrate. He wound up being charged with attempted murder on a peace officer, wound up getting additional 7 years. But so this was
the second door of the
day. Was the second door. So needless to say, my adrenaline was off the hook. And like I said, I didn't realize until we went back and watched the video of what exactly was happening, but I knew he had a knife and I knew that he was the guy that I had contact with. And
that's close.
It's close. Exactly.
That's really close. I'm just wrapping my head around this whole thing that you're basically, for people that don't know what a come along is, think of like it's a human powered winch,
yes,
effectively. And you're cranking this thing to create space so that you can get in the door. I mean, this must feel like an eternity, dude. Like,
by the way,
like slow motion, like just.
Oh, yeah. By the way, they're throwing piss and shit through the door on top of you.
That's where I was going with this. Like, so it's not just like they're not waiting for you.
No, they're not waiting. In fact, they soaped up the cell floor. They put shampoo and soap on the cell floor. So when you go in, you slip and fall, then they jump on top of you. And then, if they have weapons, they'll try to stab you or, try to beat you down, that type of thing. And by the way, there's, 200 sets of eyes that are watching this whole thing going because all the other inmates are at their cell doors.
Watching
Harlan. Watching all this stuff.
And learning.
Oh, absolutely. Because, one of those cells is the next cell we're going into, right? And we're throwing flashbangs, out. We're lighting off flashbangs out on the outside of the building to try to draw attention to the back of the cell just momentarily so we can pop the cell door open and get in there and handle business. But the flashbangs weren't working,
Wow.
We had a lot of tools that we couldn't use because it was inside. We threw gases in there, tear gas, CN, that type of thing.
Sure.
CN has very little effect. Pepper spray has very little effect when these guys have shirts wrapped around their faces and their eyes, and
they're prepared.
They soak them, so it's a filtration device that they have so that the chemicals that we use don't work. So it really comes down to physical force. And this is a long time ago. This was many years ago.
But still,
there's more tools out there now for the people. And cell extractions, not that there's a thing of the past, but thankfully for my brothers and sisters, they don't have to deal with the number of cell extractions that they used to.
But I think this paints a really clear picture, man. And I appreciate you walking through that. I mean, I think we've seen movies, we've seen stuff on TV or whatever reality shows, but you just painted a much different picture with the detail. I mean, it's almost like you can see it, feel it, smell it, almost touch it with soap on the floor, throwing, feces and urine at you, getting hit in the back of the head, like your personal experience there. But it also speaks to like a couple of things. And I think this is a good transition to make. One, how important it is to be in good physical condition and effectively be bigger than the person that you're going up against, because you have to be physically intimidating and you have to be able to dominate. The worst thing that could happen to anybody in their life, if this hasn't happened to you, is be physically dominated by another human. It's very scary. You learn,
especially one that wants to kill you, by the way, or at least, harm you, hurt you in big ways.
It's a life-changing experience, and it will change your mindset, and it then can drive behaviors like hitting the gym more often, right? Eating more protein, right? Doing everything you can to have the upper edge or the upper hand in that particular situation. But it also speaks to the stress level. I hope never to have to be in that kind of a situation before. And this is your job. This is what you punched in for the day to walk in there. But and deal with this and potentially die. Again, and this is my personal opinion, for somebody that probably did some things to some other people that in my personal opinion, I'm not so sure that you should have the opportunity to even be in the position that you're talking about right now. But I digress. But the stress, you just said that was the second door of the day, right? And you had to go multiple door after multiple door and do this time after time. That was one day in the career. That piling on, I mean, you just described kind of what it's like in that very specific situation, but can you maybe talk through, and that this was on a very special team that was very specially selected and trained in order to do these things. So it's not like you're walking in there unprepared. You know what you're getting yourself into, sort of. But what about for all the other brothers and sisters that you're talking about? How do you navigate the day? What are the things that happen on a day to day in the prison that you?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because it's working in a prison environment. When you listen to experts, psychologists, and of the like, it's likened to a war zone. Okay, so you're going into a war zone every single day with the hypervigilance that you experience, the stress levels. Every time an alarm pops off, the fact you got to run to the alarm, you don't know what you're running to. But whatever it is, it's something that's bad, where your adrenaline goes through the roof, your cortisol goes through the roof. And it's a very difficult thing. And depending on the prison that you work at, or even the yard that you work on, or sometimes the building that you work in, and how violent that it is, to experience 3, 4, 5 alarms in a day, it's something that could happen. So 5 times during the day, you're rushing to an alarm where you don't know what's happening, or sometimes it's happening on the prison yard and you can see the violence is happening. You're running towards the violence.
You have time to think about it.
Well, but it's like street cops. When you talk about active shooters, and unfortunately there's been way too many active shooters that have happened recently, cops run towards the active shooter. Everybody else is running away. Cops run toward, prison guards, correctional officers run toward the violence. You don't have the ability to run away. If you do run away, you're going to have problems. You're going to
have bigger problems.
You're going to have problems with your brothers and sisters on top of that, but you got to run towards the violence to put that down, and then a lot of times you don't have the time to power down, just like street cop doesn't have the time to power down. They went to a difficult call, and your heightened emotions and all those things are still happening. They're still going on in your body, and you got to go on to the next call. You can't just take an hour to power down and step out of your adrenaline and cortisol world. You have to power up for whatever that next event is, whatever that next alarm.
And you have to stay vigilant in between.
And you got to stay vigilant. Exactly. Because if you lose your vigilance, you can wind up getting hurt or hurting somebody else. Right. So it's if going back to it being described like a war zone, when you think about combat, specifically military combat, we send soldiers to combat for a period of time, and then we bring them back, unless you're special forces. But then even then, there's certain things that they do to make sure you're not constantly going into an operation, so you can have time to power down, be right mentally, emotionally, physically, those types of things. But you going back, and a lot of times, if you were involved in a violent event the day before as a correctional officer, you're going right back into that area where that violence just happened. So even if there's not, a significantly violent event that happens the following day, or even, 5 hours into the shift, you relive it.
Yeah. And it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when it's going to happen again.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you have all this violence that's happening, and it's constantly built up. And the soldiers get to go back, because I was in the military as well. I was never in combat, but I was in during conflicts, but never went to combat. But some of my brothers and sisters did, and to hear, they needed that time to power down. I wish that they would have had, programs in place like what they have now back in the 80s when I was in the military. But now they have things to help people decompress, power down, deal with PTSD,
it's getting a little better.
That type of thing. It's getting better. It is getting better. There's not a lot like that. There is an employee assistance program in the prison. Most people don't use it because they don't trust it. Because
we'll talk about that.
Yeah, because there's an obligation to report, for certain things. But so correctional officers, you don't have the ability to power down. There's no, we're going to pull you out and sit you on an island for a month or 2 months or 6 months before you have to go back into combat, so you can get yourself right, get your emotions right, get your mental health right, that type of thing. You're going right back into it every single day. Who can deal with that every single day?
Yeah, there's some wild statistics, right, about an average person will go through 2 very, very traumatic incidents in their whole life, whatever those things might be.
Yes.
Right. And literally what I'm hearing you say, well, the math kind of adds up. It's thousands of incidents.
Yeah. Hundreds at least. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's one of the things that I talk about in my program is the fact that the average person who's not LE, first responder, that type of thing, you know, at the most, maybe 5 critical incidents, 5, you know, fight or flight type situations where their adrenaline goes through the roof, their cortisol goes through the roof. But, you know, after a period of time, that all comes back to normal. And, you know, it could be years before they get put into a situation like that again. You know, when you talk about prison alarms or, you know, my brothers and sisters that are working the streets, you know, some of the calls that they have to go on, you know, it's adrenaline up, and then they don't really get to come to adrenaline down or cortisol down. It's adrenaline up, adrenaline up, adrenaline up. And over a lifetime, and if people aren't aware, you know, what the stress hormone cortisol does and adrenaline does, it causes premature aging.
1,000%.
Yeah. I mean, if it only happens once every few years, it's actually normal. It's fairly healthy.
Yeah, it's normal.
You know what I mean? It's putting your body in a stressful situation. And, you know, your
body responds, build resilience,
all that kind of stuff. But if you're never allowed to power down from that cortisol adrenaline world, you know, and it was like a light went on when I was studying this stuff, when I was, you know, trying to build this program of wellness to give back. And it was like, what's no damn wonder that we die before 60 years old, because we're constantly living in this cortisol adrenaline world, you know, and you can't sleep. So you drink alcohol, and then you wake up kind of tired because you didn't really get good sleep. So you start pounding the caffeine so you can power back up to go back to work. And by the way, if you are already, you know, powered up on caffeine and you know, a little over caffeinated.
Yeah, just 10x that, right?
Oh, and you know, maybe a little irritable because the caffeine level. And I see my brothers and sisters walking around the prison, and they have an equipment belt on, you know, and they have pepper spray holders, and what fits perfectly inside of a pepper spray holder is a rock star.
Red Bull.
Yeah, exactly. So they got energy drinks on their belts, you know, and I'm sitting there going, man, we're killing ourselves out there trying to protect society, you know, and dealing with the worst of the worst. So it's this vicious cycle of cortisol, adrenaline, caffeine, alcohol. I mean, it's tough on the body. It really is.
Yeah, it's got to be. So we're talking about sort of the physiological effects and impacts on the body, and this constant like tug of war of, you know, ebb and flow of trying to stay up, but also get down. And then your body never really having an opportunity to down regulate at all, whether because of the external stimulus or stress that's being put on, or that you're putting on it yourself. Now, at the same time, like you're looking for an outlet, right? And maybe that's working out, right? Because it makes you feel good. It might help you with sort of that cortisol response. But at the same time, it could be hurting you because you're now putting even that much more stress on yourself from a physical perspective. So these are these physiological things. We talk about that a lot here on the show in a couple of different formats. Just, hey, we have to find ways to manage this. But in this line of work, I'm going to say to me, it almost sounds impossible, but I know there's an answer here, and you that's what you deal with. But before we get there, there's also this other thing that starts to create. And I think when you start, this is anywhere in life, whether it's corrections or otherwhere, but I hear a lot of law enforcement, I'll just say first responders talk about this, or they start going to substance abuse, or they start going to these high risk behaviors that start to manifest into bigger problems, right? And then it kind of spins wildly out of control. I mean, I don't know what the divorce rate is in the law enforcement community, but I know it's very, very high. I mean, I think in the state of California, it's already like 60% non-law enforcement related.
Right. I'd heard that it's as high as 75%. And, you know, there's jokes out there that you're not even a senior officer into 2 divorces in.
That's awful.
You know, and you could be, you know, 5 years in the department and already 2 divorces in. But thank you. Getting back to that high risk behavior. So, you know, that was something that I struggled with for a long time, because when you're living in a world of adrenaline and cortisol, and you're living in a high risk world to begin with in the prison system, and you're exposed to that, you know, that type of violence and that type of craziness for, you know, 8, 16 hours a day or whatever it is, that becomes normal.
Yeah, that's to me, that's crazy to think.
Yeah.
Like it's almost insanity to think that that's normal for a sizable part of our population. How many law enforcement or corrections officers?
30,000.
30,000 people in our state that are that's normal for.
Is normal, right? So it's crazy because you don't feel right unless there's some level of stress that you're under, some level of adrenaline, some level of cortisol, you know, some stage of hypervigilance. I mean, in some cases, extreme hypervigilance. You're like stuck in this world. And as much as you want to step back and not, you know, feel like you need to risk something. And for me, you know, high risk it took all kinds of different forms and different shapes and different sizes. Yeah. So, and I had to go to counseling for 2 years to unwire my brain. I got into a wreck with the department, and that was another wake up call was, hey, dummy, you know, if you keep doing some of this high risk behavior, you're not going to make it to retirement. Outside of, you know, my physical issues, my medical ailments that I had going on, my high risk behavior was going to, you know, cause me not to make it to the end of retirement. So, you know, and whether it's, you know, I was constantly looking for ways to feed my appetite. So when I was going to this counselor, he's a great counselor, by the way. And I went through some counselors. He was probably the sixth counselor that I went to see because the other ones were crazier than I was. And I was like, oh my God, this person's going to help me? Nope. Next.
Heard this so many times. Oh, yeah. They just don't have any idea. They can't relate.
No, they can't relate at all. So, you know, the guy that I finally go to, I'm like, dude, you don't know me. I'm going to waste my time talking to you, and you're going to be just like the other quacks that I met, you know, and he goes, really? He goes, well, you know, give me a shot. I'm like, all right. So I talked to him for 5 minutes, and he goes, I got an idea who you are. And he goes, you're this guy, bop, 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 and rolled it all out to him. I'm like, oh shit, this guy gets me.
Okay.
You know, all right, I get it. You know, he's my guy, you know, so 2 years I went to see this guy, and he's trying to unwire my brain. He says, you have developed such an appetite for destructive behavior, high risk behavior, just like any other appetite. You know, if you go home and you eat a gallon of ice cream every day and you develop that appetite and you're trying to outdo yourself, because pretty soon that's not going to satisfy you. At some point, you got to step away from ice cream, right? Whether it's cold turkey or whether it's, you know, weaning yourself off a little bit at a time, you got to get off of that.
Right.
So, and that's the way that he explained it to me. And it made a lot of sense to me was I needed to step outside of that appetite and put that appetite away and away for good. And that's what really got me. My trajectory changed, you know, in big ways, was understanding that if I kept on the path that I was going, there was going to be a wreck. And I tell this when I do my presentations up and down the state, and I've done them, you know, nationally as well. But I tell people there was a wreck coming for me, and it was either coming in the department or is coming in my personal life. And the wreck happened in the department. I got in trouble. And then it also happened in my personal life. But the wreck that I saw coming in my personal life was a life ender. You know, it was not unusual for me to do 120, 130 miles an hour in my Ducati.
And not care.
You needed it to happen, wanted it to happen, you know, and passing 6 cars at a time and, you know, that type of thing. And crazy thing is I had since sold my Ducati, but went out and bought another one just a year and a half ago. And I was actually up riding up in the foothills, right in the mountains this weekend, and almost got hit head on by a car. And I'm sitting there going, I don't have those high risk behaviors anymore, but here I am, you know, almost getting taken
exposed.
Yeah, exposed still. But yeah, I knew that there was a wreck coming and things needed to change. So a lot of that came by way of having a significant emotional event in my life when my ass got kicked by the department. And when they said, hey, you know, drive up to Sacramento, we got to have a conversation about, you know, you and your high risk behavior. And from there, it was kind of a downward spiral for a minute, you know, and then I needed to reinvent myself and go, okay, you know, if I'm in a wreck in the department, I still have to perform within the department. I'm a performer. That's what I do. I'm a get it done guy. So I was never going to lay down and not go to work and not, you know, but when you've had, you know, that type of checking by the department and you're like, oh shit, it was a wake up call. And so I go to this prison that's an hour and a half away from my house. They reassign me to another prison, an hour and a half away from my house. And when I get there, the staff, it's another high security prison, and the staff were very welcoming to me. They had heard a lot about me. Staff do background checks on administrators all the time, you know, when they're on their way to an institution.
That makes perfect sense.
Especially as a placement, you know, it's like, oh, what did this guy do to get placed here at this institution, right? So a lot of them, some of them knew me already. Some of them did a background check and found out, you know, during my younger years as a supervisor and as a manager, I was a bit of an asshole. And, but you know, when I talked to the union guys over there, like, hey, we're going to give you a chance, you know, just don't be the guy that you were at Corcoran or, you know, wherever. We're going to give you a chance. So the fact that they welcomed me in, you know, after having, you know, had my ass handed to me by the department and then going through what I was going through in my marriage and my personal life and all the difficulties that I was having there, it was a big breath of relief to go, you know, these guys got my back. Right. So, while I was there and I was pouring into staff, I was like, I got to help staff. I got to help staff. You know, that's when I started to really develop the wellness thing and go, how can I help staff? You know, 4 years, I think I was four or 5 years into working at the institution, and there was either 4 or 5 officer suicides at the institution. And I was like, this has got to stop.
So that's my thing. So I'm listening to you tell the story, kind of your own story. And there were points in there where you knew this wasn't good, but there was a wake up call that you got from the department. And you said there was some stuff in your personal life and this kind of all came together and you got this talking to. So it was almost like you had, I call this like shaking somebody's state, like you got your cage rattled.
Got my
right?
cage rattled. Significant emotional event is what I call it.
Right, significant emotional event, rather than being smacked on your motorcycle by doing something stupid or drinking yourself to death or what is the consequence? I mean, what are we seeing? You just mentioned that when people hit these significant emotional events and the choices that they make and this place that they reach, which leads into the work that you're doing, which is a point of no return a lot of times. And again, I've had other people that have sat in that chair and have talked to me about this and had their own experiences. I had a firefighter who sat there with a loaded 9mm in the front seat of his car, and his friend just so happened to call him, right, sitting in that parking lot. Or there's been other stories. I guess my point of this is, without rehashing any of that, is they take it to a point where they don't think there's another way, and they don't think that there's going to be another chance, or they don't, in their mind.
Well, either that or they're in so much pain that they just want to be out of the pain. And the only way that they feel like they can get out of that pain in that moment is to, you know, to end everything. And I call that, when I do my presentations, I call that point in time. So if you find yourself in a point in time and you're just overwhelmed by everything and it's all coming at you, right? Your finances are screwed up. I call it too, you know, when you have an officer can't get right. That's kind of my term. Officer can't get right. You know, you're having problems at with your family, you're having problems at work, you're having financial problems, and you continue down that path and you just can't get right. You can't right yourself. You know, you can't get into a better place and you're stuck in that point in time. Sometimes it takes somebody else getting involved. Sometimes it takes asking for help. You know, and we're not great at asking for help.
We mentioned that at the get-go.
Yeah, we suck at asking for help. But you got to have the ability to, you know, put that stigma aside. It doesn't make you a pussy if you ask for help. It makes you strong.
Exactly.
You know, I sit there and go, who's the bigger pussy? The person that puts the gun in the mouth and pulls the trigger, or the one that says, you just checked out everything? At that point, you know, you've left an aftermath of destruction after you've pulled the trigger
for somebody else to deal with. You know, where if you ask for help and you know, start reaching out and you start putting those parts and pieces together, you can get out of that point in time. You can become whole again. And I tell people this all the time. We can make you whole, whether it's, you know, the Guardian program or whether it's a psychologist, because as guardians, we're really mentors. Sometimes it takes more than a mentorship to get you right. Sometimes it takes counseling. Like for me, it was 2 years. I had an officer reach out to me that needed to go into an inpatient program. So it's, you know, trying to help find the right inpatient program for that person so that they can get themselves right. You can be whole again. And I tell people that all the time. Just because you're broken right now, and you could be severely broken, you don't have to stay broken. You can get fixed. We can make you whole again. So let's talk about the Guardian program and how you're helping people do that, because you've talked about this presentation that you're doing and how you're bringing this to light. And again, I just want to make the note as a civilian, you know, who again doesn't have to deal with this stuff on a daily basis, but wants to be aware and maybe try to be part of the solution somehow. And I think starting with trying to be part of the solution is becoming informed. Yeah. And there's so many people. And again, this you and I were talking off air at some point about, you know, kind of Department of Corrections being the redheaded stepchildren
of law enforcement.
Yeah. Nobody wants to think about them. Nobody ever talks about them. There's never any cool Instagram pics of the Department of Corrections.
No.
Right? There's never any feel-good stories coming out of the state prison system.
There really isn't.
There isn't. There's nothing. Yeah. There's go to work, deal with the worst of the worst, come home, be expected to deal with it, come back the next day, do it again and again and again for 38 years and go into retirement maybe to live a couple more years.
Yeah. And a lot of people go into retirement broken, by the way.
Well, based on everything you've described, it's very obvious to me why. And there's 30,000 of them right now that are in that situation right now.
That's correct.
That are on that could be on that trajectory. So enter the Guardian program. Enter a guy who basically got a second chance.
Yep.
Right. And the department did that for you because of the reputation that you had and how hard you worked and the relationships that you had built along the way. And you mentioned it as being sort of a breath of fresh air. Like, you know, you kind of take a step back and like, okay, I have an opportunity here. What am I going to do with it? How does that work out? How did we get to Guardian program?
So there was a lot of us. It wasn't just me. There was several people who recognized that we needed something. We needed a spark. We needed to initiate some change. And what did that look like? So initially I started working with CCPOA, California Correctional Peace Officers Association, labor organization for line staff, and developed a program with them and would travel up and down the state of California doing presentations. My initial presentation was called Out of the Darkness, where it talked about, you know, hey, let's have a conversation about what we deal with. Let's be able to talk about it in a room to try to get past the stigma and try to acknowledge. Let's all just acknowledge where we're at, right? Let's talk some truth.
Shit's hard.
Yes, this shit ain't easy, right? Let's have some truth. And the more that I spoke, and the more people were like, you know, this guy's talking the truth. He's not, you know, sugarcoating anything. He's telling it like it is. Not only that, but I was an administrator while I was walking out here, you know, doing these presentations. So, you know, it was cop to cop because I still considered myself a cop, right? But more than that, it was administrator to cop. If this administrator can stand in front of, you know, 50 cops or whatever and talk about the struggles that he had, I can relate to that.
It's like a player's coach, right, on the football field or whatever, right?
Yeah. Okay, here's all my mistakes. You know, let's learn from my mistakes. And you probably had some of the same mistakes. Let's talk about that. And what'd you do for your mistakes? This is what I did for my mistakes.
Yeah, I've been punched in the mouth too. I know what that feels like. I didn't just get handed this position. Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, gotcha.
100%. So we started off with CCPOA traveling up and down, you know, the California, and what that branched out into some other things. The California Correctional Supervisors Organization reached out to me and said, will you do some presentations for us? I said, absolutely. So I went and did some presentations for them. I actually wrote, you know, what would essentially be a pilot project. That was the program, which has since become the Guardians. And I shopped that program around to try to get some funding for it, shopped it to CCPOA. They went a different direction and shopped it, actually sent a copy up to some very high ranking people in the department. Didn't hear back from them. I think they had already started, you know, their own version of the wellness program. So I think they wanted to continue on with that. And then later on, I was getting close to retirement, and I had CCSO, California Correctional Supervisors Organization. They reached out to me and said, what's the next step in this, you know, wellness thing? And I say, well, funny you should ask, because I got this little pilot project that, you know, I wrote called Guardians. And the president of CCSO, Art Gonzalez, says, why don't you come up to the Sacramento area, basically, and why don't you, you know, show me what this is about? He'd already known me from doing presentations and being around CCSO, and knew that I was in the wellness arena, and he really wanted to support the wellness thing and get that jumped off. So at that point, I was like, why wouldn't I? You know, they're willing to potentially fund this and move it forward. So I went up there, laid it out to him. He's like, I want to be involved. CCSO wants to be involved. So I started putting the parts and pieces together. So initially, like I said, my first program that I wrote was called Out of the Darkness. And it was because I found myself in a very dark place, especially towards that time in my career where I was going through all the madness, that point in time that I had.
The point in time.
And
officer can't get right.
I was an administrator can't get right, you know, to a large degree. Right. So then I'm sitting there going, out of the darkness means that there's light, right? I need to walk towards the light. I need to figure out what that light looks like. I need to start making better decisions. Need to start putting my life back in order and get out of this point in time. So we live in the law enforcement world, any type of first responder, specifically corrections. It is a very, very dark environment. And over years, we go from the person that we were when we started the department to a very dark version of the person that we are in today's our own world now. We're much darker than we were because of what we've experienced, right? But
it piles on.
Oh, it just piles on, the darkness and darkness and darkness. And I'm sitting there going, oh, I've got all this darkness that I'm living in. How do I get out of the darkness? And oddly enough, is I'm listening to, I'll give another plug to the band Disturbed. Those guys, they actually have a song, I think it's called The Light. And when I was listening to the song, it was like, hey, you don't have to live in this darkness. You can make a choice to live in the light. And I'm sitting there going, that's my mantra. That's everything that I've been trying to establish. Mindset. That's mindset, right? So I started focusing more on the light than the darkness and trying to understand what it takes to get to the light. And when I was doing research and really looking into the solution, we know what the problem is. Yep. Has anybody come up with a solution other than education, talking about it? We're reactionary, but where's the positivity? Where's the, before the shit happens, the proactive portion of it? Where's the proactive portion of it? So in my research, I ran across this organization called the HeartMath group, HeartMath organization. They're based out of California, and I was reading up on a program they have, and it's the BPR, which is Building Personal Resiliency, right? And I'm sitting there going, what's this all about? So I reach out to them, and they're like, man, we've been dealing with law enforcement for a long time. We've got studies that we did. I think they did a study down in San Diego with 80 officers, and they put them all through this program. And at the end of the program, they went back and had them do a survey. And every officer, I believe, responded that the HeartMath techniques helped them tremendously.
So it's marked. Yeah. It wasn't just like some department policy, or whatever. Yeah, gotcha.
And it wasn't done in a reactive manner. It was done in a proactive manner. So I'm sitting there going, this might be the answer, right? So as they're sending me information, and of course there's a cost to go through the program. It's an 8-week program, and it's all done via Zoom. And, the CCSO picked up the tab for the program, and there were some key players that it's not just me and Guardians. There's some key players that I reached out to that I either heard about or had knowledge of. One of them is a psychologist, actually, who worked within the department. She's an amazing person. 27 years she did with the department before she retired. She wanted to give back to her brothers and sisters. Some other lieutenants that wanted to give back as well. So we put this team together, and initially there was, I believe, only 3 of us that went through the HeartMath training, and all 3 of us was like, "This is it. This is."
You figured it out.
Oh, this is it. We figured it out. Right. So after we went through the training, we started to reach out and started to really build the team, and found some really awesome people that were part of a wellness program that's in place. It's the peer support. So they were already part of this peer support program. They were already helping their brothers and sisters. They either heard about Guardians or we heard about them. So we reached out to them and said, let's set up a little interview, a little meet and greet. We talked, with each one of them for about an hour via Zoom, because that was during all the COVID crap. And we found a really good core, a small core that we could start building off of. So we put them all through the HeartMath training. Everybody thought this is awesome, and it is awesome. And when we go out and we do the presentations, we go out as a team now, and we were touring prisons and talking about HeartMath, and everybody, all the cops were like, oh, this is the best thing. We need this. How come nobody ever came up with this before? But much like what happens in the LE world is when you're there in front of them, talking to them, everybody's interested. The light bulb goes off, right? But then after the fact, when you're expecting all those phone calls and you want to get into the one-on-one mentoring or the group mentoring to teach them these techniques, these stress mitigation techniques, how to control their emotions. And I want to plug HeartMath for a second, because it's an amazing program. If all the LE guys out there, please, either reach out to me and I'll tell you how the Guardians is utilizing it, or look at the Building Personal Resiliency program and think about putting some of your officers through that program so they can mentor other officers in teaching the HeartMath techniques, because the HeartMath techniques is all about prevention and doing techniques in the moment to bring your emotions down, to bring your mental wellness into a positive place, and it has an impact on you physically and spiritually as well. So when you think about the domains of resiliency, you have the physical domain, you have the mental domain, you have the emotional domain, all these domains are all working together. And when one of those domains is broken, if you're broken emotionally, it has an impact on the other three domains. If you're broken physically, it has an impact. Yeah. So you have to focus on it collectively. Holistically. And when all those four areas are clicking, you're coherent. You're in a good state, right?
And you have awareness of what the problem might be or what I might need to go address next.
100%.
It's the physical, it's the mental, it's the emotional or whatever. You're aware.
Right. And if you have to have contact with an officer on the streets and the officer is aware of these HeartMath techniques and just came from a difficult call, or, if it's an inmate in the prison side and, there was just a riot and everybody's trying to power down and the officers use these techniques to regain their emotional standpoint, their mental standpoint, that means then moving forward from that point, they're going to be, there's been some
amount of recovery.
There's been recovery. That's a great word for it. Yeah. So, and it's all about resiliency is your ability to recover from a stressful situation in a better way.
It's fatigue management.
It is fatigue management. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, so when you put all these parts and pieces together, if you're a police chief, or, running a prison yard, don't you want the most emotionally, mentally, and physically also fit people that you can have working for you?
So this is an interesting question because as a civilian, you're goddamn right I do.
Yeah.
That's where I want my money being spent, yes, right? My tax dollars being spent because I need those guys to stay in there and I need people to want to do the job that you've done, right? Because I don't have the capacity to do it. I don't want to do it. I've got kids, right? I want my family to be protected from these people. Yes. Yeah. The answer is yes, but
so let's talk about that for a second too, because you listen to all these politicians and, they go after LE, defund the police and, oh my gosh, officers need more training and you're not trained well enough and all that. You know what, where the rubber meets the road is if you are working in a prison or on the streets or whatever, sometimes you have a fraction of a second to make a decision on whether you're going home at the end of the night or whether the bad guy's going home at the end of the night. And if it's between me or the bad guy, I'm the one going home at the end of the night.
Seems fair.
Yeah. But if you're already stressed and you're not emotionally fit, you're not in the best capacity mentally or physically, and you're thrown into a stressful situation and all that's going through your body and your mind and you're trying to make the best decision, split-second decision in that moment, are you really equipped to make that decision? You've already gone through all the training that you needed to go through. You may be a use of force instructor. You may know the use of force policy backwards and forwards, but because of your stress level, your emotional fitness, your mental fitness, right? You are not in a place in that moment to make the best decision. So regardless of how much training you've gone through, and we hear this from politicians all the time, officers need more training. Not necessarily. Officers need to be less stressed. Right. Officers need to be emotionally fit, right? We need to recognize that the answer is doing things that puts them in a better mindset, something that they can practice. And that's where this HeartMath thing comes in, man. These techniques are so simple. And it's really tapping into, your emotions. And I'm not talking your emotions, not.
Well, give me an example. Because there's going to be people out there and be like, dude, this is fucking hokey. What are we talking about? Sitting around holding hands in a circle?
No, nothing like that.
So give us an example. Because I think going back to the stigma, this is the thing. I don't want to go sit around in a circle and hold hands with people and talk about my problems or, what my relationship was like with my parents growing up.
No, it's nothing like that.
Okay. So give us an example.
So what it teaches you is it teaches you in the moment how to identify the draining emotions that you happen to be in. So if you picture a chart, and on the right side of the chart are all these emotions that are draining you: fatigue, irritable, mad, just being pissed off, being angry, anxious, nervous, it's all those stressful type situations, right? If you're constantly living on that side of the chart, or what we call a grid, that side of the grid, and you're your battery's constantly being depleted, your battery's constantly being drained, and you're always tired. How many cops do you talk to, whether it's on the streets or inside the prison, and go, man, I'm freaking tired all the time.
All the time.
And they jump on testosterone thinking that's going to, save them, but it's not that.
Blame the hormones.
Blame the hormones. It's the fact that you are in these constant, states of energy drains, right? So when you start to become more self-aware of what's draining your energy, what emotions you're going through every day that's draining your energy, and then you recognize that. So for me, I'll use myself as an example. I was pissed off from the time I woke up in the morning. When my feet hit the floor, I was just an angry dude. Just not happy, right? I was starting to lose energy based off of my emotions right off the bat.
The day hadn't even started yet.
Yeah. And when you go to work in a prison and that's how your day starts, you think your day is going to get any better?
No, man. So you got nowhere to go but more recovery debt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, you have all these emotions and all these attitudes that are constantly draining you. And then you have to recognize that there's, and by the way, when you're living on that side of the grid, that's the cortisol, adrenaline, that's all the negative hormones.
The stress hormone
It's
side.
the stress hormone side, right? But then there's the other side of the grid where you're appreciative, you're happy, you're calm, those types of things. And you recognize that, I'd rather live on this left side of the grid. This is a
no-brainer, right?
This is where I can, to repower. This is where I can, be more resilient. This is where I can store up my energy better, right? This is where I'm going to be more emotionally fit so I can make better decisions in stressful situations and I can recover faster. How do I get myself over there, right? So it really does come down to a personal choice. It's so freaking simple.
It is at the end of the day, isn't it?
I choose not to be
angry.
in this angry, negative state, right? I choose to be, more calm and more appreciative. And for me, it was just thinking about what calm feels like, thinking about, how to put myself over there and just not having those angry thoughts, right? And it takes a little bit of practice.
Oh, you definitely have to peel back the layers of the onion a few times.
What's causing it, that
you may
thing.
think until somebody maybe even helps you get to the next level and go, oh, fuck, I thought it was this, but it's not that at all. Like,
exactly.
I have fear.
Let me ask you this. Do you ever have a person that, when they come into your gym and I don't know, maybe you don't want to answer this.
No, go ahead, man. Answer.
But is that one person that that you're going to wind up having a 20-minute conversation with because they got all these questions and they just want to talk and they stress you out?
Happens every day.
And it's like, I got more shit to do, but I got to try to give this person time.
You have to put on the hat.
You got to put the hat on, the business owner hat, and you got to be that guy, right?
Yeah, all the time.
So if you were to go, oh my God, it's about that time that Johnny's going to come in and Johnny's going to want to have a conversation. So you go, okay, let me power down. Let me get to a mental state, an emotional state where I can handle it better and just know that it's going to be what it is.
Right. I
don't have to get all bent. I can make it over the next 20 minutes and be okay.
It's literally a decision.
It's a decision. It's a philosophy to live life in a better way and not let stress impact you the way that it does. And this is the most simplest of terms, by the way. It gets deeper than this.
Oh, I'm sure.
This is just one of those exercises.
Because if it was that simple, everybody would just be choosing to do it.
Well, part of it is that simple.
Like, okay, all right, fair enough.
Yeah, but no, part of it is, and when we do our initial mentoring, when we meet and the initial time that we talk with somebody who's in a place where they really need us, what we do is I'll send them a copy of the grid, right? And I'm like, just look at the grid, look at the right side, look at the left side, see what drains your energy, see what restores your energy, see what puts you in a bad mood, see what the types of emotions that you go through on every day. And then when I actually initiate that first talk with them, we'll talk for, maybe an hour or something like that. And what does that look like? What does the grid look like? How do you get yourself? What causes you
from the right to the left?
To the right, exactly. And what causes those energy drains that makes you exhausted all the time, and people were like, man, this is simple. I can do this. And I'm like, yeah, you can. I'm like, so take that grid to work with you every day, put it in your lunch bell. And every once in a while, during the day, pull the grid out and say, where am I at right now? Am I on the right side of the grid or I'm on the left side of the grid? Where do I want to be? If I'm on the right side, I want to get to the left side. I want to be on the left side. What's it going to take to get there? Right? Well, it's going to take a different mindset, a different philosophy, recognizing that I need to change my emotions. I need to change my thought process. And then how do you stay there? Right. So it's really formulating a plan of doing check-ins and becoming self-aware of what puts you back on the energy draining side.
Yeah. I imagine there's also got to be some tools or some skills that you got to learn because you're going to wind up on that negative side.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen, right?
It's going to happen.
Realizing it, knowing that you're there, being okay with it, not beating yourself up. There's no self-loathing for doing it, just working to get back to the other side.
100%.
And I assume that there might be some things that are employed there with having somebody like a sponsor or somebody maybe there to help you.
Right.
So what's that about? Like, how does that work?
So that's where the mentors come in. And there's 6 of us right now. And it's a constant check-in. So, I'm working with a few people right now, and I'll reach out to them and I'm like, okay, how you doing? Let's talk about,
like coaching.
Yeah, it's coaching. That's really what it is. And you don't really call it life coaching, but the word that comes up again and again and again is mentoring.
Yeah.
And the thing is who better to mentor you than somebody that's walked in your shoes? This is a cop helping cop type thing.
That's a huge piece to this that I've heard a lot of times about, like, where's the information coming from? And in this case, it's coming from my mentor is a guy who's not only walked in my shoes, he's walked in them a long time. He's probably done more things than I'll ever do in my career, which I got to imagine is a really important thing. And the resistance piece or the friction piece that keeps people from taking advantage of maybe these other programs.
Yeah.
So I can get behind the mentoring thing because this is somebody that I could literally look up to and go, whatever I've gone through or what I'm going through, like, this person has gone through as much or maybe even more. Right. Or it's not that we're keeping score.
No, it's just a recognition.
And there's a trust.
There's a trust. And that's a big thing. Thank you for bringing that up. Trust and confidentiality. Okay. The fact that, and some of our mentors are still working, and the fact that the mentors that are still working still have an obligation to report. I mean, that's just departmental policy. That's what has to happen.
So talk about that. What does that mean? Obligation to report.
So if you're mentoring someone and they bring up a severe policy violation that's happened, then the person that is still working has an obligation to report back to the department that there's been a serious policy violation.
Wow, that's heavy.
And then that, very possibly could initiate an investigation, and then there could be disciplinary, that type of thing.
So I imagine that is a big deterrent for people wanting to reach out for help.
Of course it is.
I mean, because if they get to that point in time where things are really that bad, it's highly likely that some of this underlying shit exists.
It's happened.
Right?
Right.
Yeah. So what do they do?
Yeah. And, in talking about that as well, there's 2 big fears that cops have when it comes to reaching out for help. Okay. Am I going to lose my job? Are you going to take my gun? I mean, and when it comes to the mental health arena, the mental health world, the wellness world, those 2 things they're really attached to. They're attached. Yeah. Even outside of the stigma, I'm going to look like a pussy if I ask for help, not necessarily, we're everybody's starting to understand what this wellness thing looks like and what it feels like. And it's okay to ask for help. So asking for help is it's more accepted these days.
It's getting better.
It's getting better. Yeah. But if there is an obvious obligation to report, and people already think, that if I bring out my mental issues, my emotional issues with somebody in the department, and then they report back to the department that I need a fitness for duty because, I may not be fit to be a peace officer because of what I'm going through. And I'll be removed from my position as a peace officer. I'll be put in the mailroom to work, or I'll be taken out of the beat, and given a desk job. I'll be taking my ability to carry a firearm will be taken away. These are all things that cops are concerned with.
It's your identity.
It is your identity. And by the way, I got a whole, 2-3 hours I could talk about all the identity that we put into a fucking piece of metal that's on our chest.
That's silly, what I mean? Right?
Oh my God. And how many retirees, once they step away from the profession, that they, spent 25, 30, 40 years in some cases, and so much of their identity is wrapped up in a badge.
They don't know what to do after.
They have no clue, where your identity, it is part of your profession, but your profession is what you do so that you can afford to do things outside of work. It's not exactly who you are. It's part of who you are, right. But you're a dad, you're you're a husband, you're a brother, you're a fill in the blank, you're a football coach, you're a mentor for other people. You're so much more than just a cop. And I talk about the bubble, the LE bubble. We all live in this nice little LE bubble. And over years, if you're not in that LE bubble, there's no trust for you. We don't trust people. We don't associate with people. A lot of the cool shit that we used to do, before we were cops, we step away from that because it's not cop oriented or, those types of things. We're so focused on
protecting yourself.
We're so focused on cop shit. If that bubble ever bursts, that cop bubble ever bursts because of a disciplinary issue where there's a termination or there's a injury that happens and you just can't physically perform the functions of the job anymore, or retirement, and that bubble bursts for whatever reason.
We're back to that point in time. We're
back to that point in time. Who are you outside of that LE bubble? So I hunt, I fish, I go to the gym, I'm a husband, I'm a dad, right. Those types of things. You put more emphasis on those things. If you lose the LE portion, you still got a significant part of your life and your identity that you haven't lost. Right. That's a big deal. But getting back to the Guardian program. So those techniques and what we teach and getting people to ask for help and recognizing and the trust and the confidentiality and all that kind of stuff, it all matters. But, we thought the phone calls were going to be, coming in and people were going to be rushing to us and all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, it hasn't happened as much as we'd like. CCSO lost funding, or there's not funding for the program at this point. So, one of the things that you and I talked about offline is, and I'm so excited to see that there's so many entities out there that are moving in the same direction that I'm moving. Maybe not exactly the same way.
It's going that direction though.
It is. Yeah. I like to think that the Guardian program, being dialed in on the preventative measures, not everybody's aware of the HeartMath and the preventative measures, right? But if we can partner, some of these entities can partner, and see what the other's doing. And I had partnered for a little while with some Fresno PD guys, and one officer specifically, Jess Serta. He's a great wellness cop. He's running the wellness program down there with Fresno PD. I think there's 850 cops on Fresno PD.
All right.
Yeah, he's doing phenomenal things down there. So talk to him about HeartMath and talk to him about what he's doing. And he's one of those guys that's constantly reaching out to LE up and down the state of California and elsewhere, trying to make sure that Fresno's got, well, not only that, but trying to make sure Fresno's got the best program for their cops.
Oh, just in terms of checking into like, hey, what are best practices?
What are best practices? Exactly.
So he can improve his own program.
And sharing his best practices with others as well.
People.
So, it's like the LE community is, coming together to a certain degree under the wellness platform, but it's moving, it's still moving pretty slow. It's a culture, and we got to get past, part of that.
Yeah. So the culture piece, but there's also this agency piece. And you mentioned, I couldn't keep track of all the acronyms there, but it sounded like there was kind of 3 different organizations that you were trying to work with, or you said you were shopping the program to, that had gone different directions and finally made it to the one organization that had a little funding and there's some legs underneath it, and you were getting to get out there, which was then very quickly kind of starting to spread, right? People were starting to find out about it. They're asking questions like, oh, this is great. So you're starting to create what I like to refer to as critical mass.
Yeah.
Right. It's starting to kind of roll forward until a point in time, for lack of a better term, when the funding gets pulled from it. Right. Which then leaves the program, more importantly, the officers and the people that need the help. And then you and the people that you're working with in a really tough situation. Right. Because in order to keep that critical mass going, there's going to likely need to be some type of funding in there. Somebody's going to have to be backing this up somewhere. But as a result, because there isn't there, then it comes back to being the solution finder, the get shit done guy, right? Who then continues to push forward out of his own pocket on his own time with no compensation, just knowing that you're doing the right thing, and you're doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do to get it down the road. And you're seeing the impacts, and you're talking about, and that's why we're here today. What's the linchpin, dude? Like, I see all these different organizations. There's no standardized process. And I'm not saying having a standardized process is the right answer, because you're still figuring it out. Right. Like the thing is still evolving. But what is the answer, man? Like, how do we get this help to the people that need it? How do we get it to leadership at a level where it's accepted and it's being pushed for? Because I believe that I could be totally naive, dude, but here's what I do know in my experience along in my life. When enough people start making enough noise about it, right? And they start telling you support. I mean, just get on fucking Twitter posts can go viral with 6 people going crazy about something, which can create some CEO at some company to get fired, right? Like if we could just get a little bit more of that critical mass going at a higher level, then maybe it speeds up the process, at least getting the information downstream so that people are informed and can start asking more questions and then maybe implement it. I guess my point is what's the answer to that part? Because it sounds like there is an answer. Is it that people don't want to hear it right now? Or is it the voices or the things on some other level or at some other particular program are just louder than this one?
I don't even think it's that. I think it's that there's a lot of people out there trying to do really good things. And we're all kind of moving in the same direction, but also in different directions.
Like not talking to one another?
Well, no, I mean, there's a lot of talk that's happening. You know, there's different levels of communication that's going on out there. But I think everybody believes that, you know, they can make a difference and that they want to make a difference. And they are making a difference. I think that the community that we're trying to serve, the LA community, is so difficult to get moved in that direction. I mean, the culture is very deeply ingrained.
Oh, totally. That I do know.
Holy shit, is it deeply ingrained. And, you know, in a lot of ways, we're struggling just to survive. You know, our nose is above water, right? And we do a good job of treading and wearing ourselves out over time.
You're experts at that, man.
Yes, we are. We are. To keep our nose above water. Every once in a while you go underwater and then, you know, hopefully you have somebody to lift you up and get that nose above water again. But it's like, if people think you're trying to throw one more thing on their plate, you know, by teaching them techniques or getting some mentoring, you know, that type of thing, it's like, I'm already maxed out. You know, and I call it the bullshit factor, you know, where if you had one more piece of bullshit that comes your way, you know, that's it. I can't deal with it.
Can't deal with it.
I have seen, you know, a 3-month cop walk off the tier. I have seen a 20-year cop walk off the tier because of the bullshit factor.
They just reached the tipping point.
They reached that point where I'm done. I got to check out. And it's crazy the number of people that is being affected by this in today's world, the LE world. I mean, I know so many people, and whether it's me that know that person personally or they're a friend of a friend or whatever, it's like, hey, so-and-so just quit. He did 10 years with, you know, Clovis PD, and he decided he just couldn't take it anymore. You know, and good for you for recognizing, you know,
you're done.
Yeah. Because if you hang in there and you tried to white knuckle the rest of your career, you may wind up a statistic at some point, whether it's an unnatural death or, you know, an early death or whatever that looks like a suicide. So good for you for recognizing that you can do without the law enforcement.
It's tough though, man. Because these people made a decision to follow that career path for a reason. And what I find when I talk to these guys, much like you, is I wanted to give back. I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a difference. Yeah. Right. And then they get to a point in their career where, as you've described it, the bullshit factor gets to a point where they've decided all that passion, all that drive, all that training, all of that white knuckling it up to that point. Nah, fucking, I'm done. Like, I just don't want to do this anymore. Which leads me to the question I'd be asking on the inside of my head, which is, really, man? Is that really what it is? You're just done? Or are there things that could have been done or may have been taken off your plate to give you room to deal with stuff?
To breathe. Yeah.
And so that's why I talk about this in fitness and all the time, where, you know, people are trying to correct their path, whatever it is, and they think they need to add more onto the plate in order to do that. Like, I need we talk about hormones and nutrition, and I need supplements, and I need all this stuff. That may be very helpful for you. It may be, but for what we need to do first is we need to take some shit off your plate,
because get the foundation solid.
We got to build the foundation.
You got to build the foundation.
And those things those things won't change from person to person. Foundations are foundations.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of nuance above that when you start building the structure based on personal situations and circumstance, previous health history, professional history, all those kind of things. But again, taking things off the plate for people to breathe is what you said, and start asking the right questions so that they can get to the light. Right? Whatever that is.
Yeah. What I think, you know, if departments would more departments would recognize, large departments would recognize, and I don't mean to throw every department in the same, situation, because LAPD, I understand that it's either LAPD or SO that have an amazing wellness program jumping off, and good for them for recognizing the need. A big department to recognize the need. Fresno PD, good wellness program. When you have a department like Department of Corrections that has 30,000 officers, it's like,
it's a big ship to turn.
Man, is that a big ship to turn? I describe it as a big wheel, right? And the wheel's going to turn. And whether it's, 50 cops commit suicide in a month or one in 5 years, the wheel still has to turn. You
can't just shut it down and take a break.
You can't. It's still going to turn, and you could be on the wheel or you could be under the wheel, and it's still, I used to think the Department of Corrections, or at least, some of the prisons that I worked at, they can't run without me. This prison cannot run without me, right? Bullshit. Your shelf life after retirement is about 90 days at best.
That's incredible.
After 27 years of blood, sweat, and tears, it's
you
like,
might live 3 months.
Well, no, I mean your shelf life, meaning people remembering you, what you did in the department, some of the strives that you tried to do and what you tried to represent.
Yeah, it's all forgotten.
Your thought process. Yeah, because the next person comes in next to you and changes everything that you just did for, the last 5 or 10 years. So, it's like that in itself is difficult. So getting back to your original question, what's the answer? I don't know that there's a global answer. I think it's trying to touch people individually, best we can, and save the lives that we can save. And, and there's one of the guys, Rich Barraza, he's a deputy director with the Guardians. He, his goal is to have no suicides, and that's a lofty goal. And, that's a goal that we should be working towards.
That's crazy it's not crazy. It's just the fact that has to be a goal. Right. In and of itself should just speak volumes to why aren't we putting more into this if this is our goal?
Right.
Like to prevent. Sorry.
Right.
To cut you off. But
that's
a lot.
And when there is a suicide that happens, it's like, it hurts so bad. And, and I've had conversations with him, after suicides and we want to provide a response when we can to the institution where the suicide occurred, to try to be there to support and all that kind of stuff. And when we had money, the proactive side of getting out there and having conversations in the institutions before the suicides happened, trying to prevent people talking about point in time and all that kind of stuff. But it hurts. It hurts when there's a suicide, and you go, okay, we lost one. But how many did we save along the way? Mm-hmm. How many people were in similar situations where, either the mentorship or, just knowing that somebody gives a shit about them? Because a lot of times, especially in the CDCR world, it's like you don't feel like an individual. You don't feel any value in you.
It's like a number.
Well, yeah, you're nothing more than a mechanism for inmate program. I have to be in this position to keep the inmate program running.
So who am I working for? What am I really contributing to?
Exactly. Beyond the paycheck, and it's a great paycheck, and there's really good retirement if you get to, and I want to talk about retirement for a minute, but yeah, it's a good living, but we're coming full circle here, by the way. That's where we're headed.
That's exactly right.
That's where we're headed. You got to be able to survive to, enjoy some of that retirement. And if the expected, age of death is before 59. And a few years ago, through contracts, don't get me started on our governor, but they just, yeah.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, God, I'd wind up with DOJ at my house knocking on the door. But anyway, yeah. So if our life expectancy is less than 60, and then they just went back and they reformulated a few years ago our retirement. And these kids that are coming up in the department now, 57 and a half is the retirement age. We're not expected to make it to 60. 57 and a half, it was raised from 50 to 57 and a half. Do you think there might have been some prior planning on somebody's
good God,
part
yes.
to say, think about how much money
they're not expecting you to make it to retirement.
Exactly right. So, if the state doesn't have to pay out, if PERS doesn't have to pay out, the only people that get hurt in this are the people that spent, 37 and a half years in some cases working in the prison. They're the ones, so it's like, is that fair? Is that fair to give up so much of your life and give up, a good portion of your life expectancy to have that, be your demise, your end?
Look, man, you were saying it's a cultural change.
Yeah.
It starts from within. It has to start with the individual, right? And wanting to help and peel back those layers. And then they have to be aware that those things are happening. That has to go upstream.
Yeah.
To start gaining respect so that they recognize this, the stigma that's attached to asking for help. And, you know, again, going through some wellness techniques to keep yourself online goes beyond you're just being a pussy, man. Like, right. Suck it up. This is what you signed up for.
Holy shit. That was the attitude for years. Yeah. That was the attitude for years. You know, hey, Buttercup, did you think it wasn't going to be difficult working inside of a prison?
But here's the other part of that. And you just described it, I mean, pretty articulately. And that is, maybe that is what's happening. And that culture has been changing and people are getting better. And guess what? They're stacking the deck against you. They being those that make decisions maybe at a higher level, knowing that you can make it maybe a little bit longer, right? And that there could be some planning around it, which means you might have to work a little bit harder as a team to get this information out there. I mean, like you said, it really is just about continuing the conversation. Yeah. There is not like one solution, but it's about people becoming informed and becoming as passionate about it as you have. And then maybe being able to show some statistics over time that how this stuff is benefiting people, aside from what you're hearing, what you've said in the moment, kind of in making these presentations, people like, yes, we need this. And great, here's the resources. So give us a call. Let's work together on this. And then phone lines are silent when they figure out the work that really has to maybe be put in to actually do that. So, man, if there were things that people like me, or even officers, but more specifically, that's 30,000 of them, but I don't know what the population of California is now, but it's massive. And I'm just talking about California. Population of San Jose is whatever. If there were people like me, civilians that wanted to try and make a difference, that wanted to contribute to make these programs happen and make them better, where would we even start, man?
You know, you can reach out to organizations that support, you know, these types of programs, like California Correctional Supervisors Organization. There's stuff all over, Facebook that are, wellness type programs. I'm not armed with any specific information right now. Maybe after the fact we can post something.
Yeah, totally.
But at the end of the day, there are some really awesome groups out there that are trying to do good things. Guardians is one of them. We're actually in the process. We were in the process of trying to attach to a foundation so that we can, receive donations. Like I said, we were being funded by an organization. That organization started a foundation, and that was part of what we were going to do moving forward, was try to get individuals, corporations, businesses to start to donate so that we can raise the funds. If every time we go out and we do a training, and what the thought process was, and this is what worked with CCPOA to a certain degree, was you send out mass flyers to the corrections officers that live in a certain region.
All right.
And mailers out. We have their address, that type of thing. And it says, hey, come listen to this presentation. It's about employee wellness, and we want to talk to you, have a conversation, open conversation. And you put some things on there like a warning sign. If you don't come, you may only live till 60, something that gets their attention. Most of the time,
which wasn't put in their original
flyer. It wasn't in the original
the
flyer. Now we're going to tell you about it. Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes those flyers reach the right hands. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they wind up in the trash can because of family members, that collect the mail that day or whatever. But at the end of the day, if just a few people show up for the presentation, it would be done regionally. And there's a cost to that. And we expected the cost to be somewhere around $10,000 with, the traveling of the mentors and, putting them in a hotel room. And most hotels will let you, rent out a conference room for, 8 hours, $350, So when we projected the cost, it was about $10,000 each event. And that was going to be used to not only educate the officers themselves, but also allow the family to come in. Because the family, if the family's not aware of what that officer's going through, oftentimes if we talk about it and we educate the family, who better to educate, what crisis looks like or what high risk behavior is? Because the spouses will say, I saw changes. And I'm like, oh, you saw changes. What did those changes look like? Well, he never did that before. Or, she would come home pissed off every day, or there was more drinking than there's ever been before. What'd you do about it? Well, I didn't do anything. I mean, I thought that was just part of it, or I didn't know who I could talk to.
It becomes normalized.
I didn't know who to reach out to, so-and-so is becoming more violent. When they come home, they're they're angry. They're angry, not necessarily violent is in domestic violence. That's not what I'm referring to, but just angry people.
Edgy,
yeah, absolutely. How do you deal with that? So it's knowing where the resources are at. And we were trying to push that out and get it out there so that there were resources out there. Unfortunately, it's difficult to do without funding. And I want to give a shout out to my team though, because they have continued to work as much as they can. And just like I've been doing, take the brunt of the financial, hit on themselves. So I had a contract with CCSO. I was under contract for a certain number of hours and a certain hourly wage.
Yeah.
For 10 months, I did not submit an invoice to be paid by CCSO. I did it for free. And they did reimburse travel and stuff like that. But as far as my contract for my hourly wage, for 10 months, I didn't submit that because I wanted the program to stay viable. I wanted to make sure that I could give back to a degree where the program grew, more financing came in. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And we find ourselves in a situation now where I don't regret not taking a paycheck, but at the end of the day, it wasn't about pay to begin with. It's about helping people. And so it was simple for me to be able to have that mindset. But at the end of the day, I'm retired and I have certain financial goals that, I want to try to meet, for my family.
Only so much you can do.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I have to try to focus on that as well. As I own a firearms business and a firearms training business, tactical firearms instructor for years and being on, our SWAT team, that type of stuff. I teach a lot of CCW classes, and one of my other passions, especially, we've all heard the term, right? When it comes to a bad guy with a gun, who handles that?
Right.
A good guy with a gun.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Whether it's a cop or whether it's a CCW permit holder or whatever that looks like. I'm a Second Amendment guy. I know you are too.
1000%.
So at the end of the day, if I'm out there pushing my CCW classes and, trying to do the best I can do to train people and make them proficient, then maybe one day I hope that none of the people that I train are ever in a active shooter type situation. But if they are, you can save a lot of lives.
We all know first responder.
Absolutely.
Take care of business.
And I tell them all, you don't have an obligation to respond as a first responder, but if you're proficient, if you're emotionally fit, if you're, in a good place mentally and you can respond, dispatch the bad guy, you can save a lot of lives. The whole purpose of an active shooter in their life is to commit mass murder, kill as many people as they can. And what was crazy was, years, active shooters used to take their own lives.
Yeah, not anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be that way anymore.
Because they get put up and they're in the public spotlight.
Yeah,
after that,
exactly.
They have a different agenda now.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, but yeah.
Yeah. So you're doing all these things to continue to try to give back to the community. There's also, again, I mean, you live in California. It's not cheap to live here. There's all those things in terms of financial goals and what you're doing for your family, but also for the community in terms of the law enforcement community and, their mental health and wellness and keeping the profession viable, both for the officers and for us, the public. We'll post some stuff in the show notes for them. But if they want to find out more about like the Guardians program, where do they go to find out specifically about that? Is that like guardians.com? Like what?
We had a Facebook page up and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But when we lost the funding, it was one of those things where we could only do so much.
Right.
And unfortunately, you can't handle, a lot of people reaching out. We want to be there, but at the end of the day, we have to, have the finances to be there too. So
I totally get it.
So the Facebook was taken down, the Instagram was taken down. But if you go to Guardians at ccsfnet.org.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I'll give you a card and make sure that you have information, so you can post it moving forward. That's one way to get a hold of us. And that's probably the best way, actually.
So I was just thinking, like if you're an officer or if you're in some way involved with the wellness program at your department or your agency and you're looking for resources or whatever, at least go take a look, right? And reach out, because while you're doing things out of pocket and trying to make a difference in your own way in the way that you can now, there's going to be resources there that they can try and take advantage, or at least push upstream or even downstream to people that need help right now, like a phone call looking for a mentor or something like that to help them out. Right. I mean, and that's, again, to help somebody with that moment in time where things look really, really dark. They're trying to get to the other side.
Absolutely.
Rick, man, I appreciate you coming down. I mean, this is a passionate topic of mine. We had not had anybody in here from the corrections perspective. Some law enforcement, some firefighters, and some other people from the military. And again, one of the things that was really important for me is that you were able to get your message out this way. I appreciate you telling your story and sharing the time with me and making the journey here to do that. And if there's anything I can do to somehow help beyond kind of getting the message out, man, you got a believer in me, dude.
I appreciate that.
So
yeah.
Hit me up.
I think just that networking and I know you're connected well with people that are moving in the same direction, and, making sure that we have the ability to connect with those type of people, so we could partner at some level. If people, even if people aren't aware of HeartMath, and Guardians can only do so much, but other people have a financial stronghold, or, can function at a higher level than Guardians can at this point because of finances, showing them what the HeartMath looks like, and getting them, to go through, putting through some of their people through the building personal resiliency program, so they can see what that looks like, getting these techniques out there. That's important stuff. You know
what, man? This goes way beyond law enforcement as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you look around in society right now, go back to your active shooters and things like that. I mean, these are people that need this kind of help.
Yes.
Right. I mean, that's a huge, huge problem in our society. Obviously, it's rearing its ugly head, unfortunately, almost on a daily basis now. Yeah. And these are techniques that everybody could benefit from. But by the way, so big plug to the Overwatch Collective, our guys right up here in Half Moon Bay. These are your guys, and we're going to get you guys connected after this too.
That's awesome.
They are doing some really great stuff in the same realm. So anyway, like I said, Rick, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, brother. I appreciate your time and letting me come on.
Likewise.
All right, brother. Thank you.